A little bit of housekeeping while we're kind of getting geared up here. Great to see all of you. November 8th, just around the corner. There's a lot of interesting topics that have kind of found their way onto what is impactful to business. To kind of, set the tone a little bit. For any of those who don't know me, I'm looking really quick. I recognize just about all the faces here, but I am Tara Doyle-Enneking, the CEO of the Puyallup Sumner Chamber of Commerce. I've been here for 3 years and 10 months now. So we've done a lot here with the chamber, and advocacy certainly serves a very important role in that. We're very proud that our allies in the 25th and 31st district, our county council reps, city council are all, definitely allies, and not something that I feel we have to go too hard and too heavy on with really trying to bring business issues to the forefront with them. That's a whole other job for chambers that have to kind of battle that out. So it's really great that these relationships are established and that there's a lot of that kind of mindset already on. So providing these candidate forums is a way that you, who may or may not be engaged in the process and where candidates are aligned, this would give you, a little more insight on to those platforms. So when we work our way from each of the races, I do hope that the candidates will take advantage of, certainly you've got your 2-minute sort of stump speech, but I do hope that you take some considerate time to kind of remember, we are a chamber, we're your business audience. And if there are definitely some sort of hard line definitive differences between your candidates, again, this is a very supportive and welcoming platform, so I'm not necessarily looking for anyone to say anything negative, but I do hope that if there is a distinguishing difference, that I hope you feel that this is a format you can speak candidly about that. So I do encourage that. I will also mention that, 2 of the congressional races, we are working to get those candidates on for the next GAC, which is on November 1st. That'll be a week prior to the elections. So circling around to those candidates, so more to come. So with that, welcome. Happy to have you all here. Luke Korum, once again. Luke, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes. My name is Luke Korum. I'm a 3rd-generation business owner here in the Puyallup Sumner Valley, new car dealer, and been part of the chamber for 4 or 5 years, been on the board for a couple of years, and been doing these candidate interviews for the last couple of years, and enjoy them. So my goal is to, just like the email sent out, is to ask questions through the chamber lens. So the focus is the forum is to allow the business community to hear directly from the candidates through the lens. And the way I came up with my questions, I cruised through all your guys' websites, Facebooks, and Twitter, and just anything that was business related. Some crime stuff comes up, of course, but mostly business, economic growth, things like that I'll be asking today.
Awesome. Thanks for teeing that up so well. A little idea of the format today. We will go through each of the races. Candidates, I will kind of tee you up to go ahead and give us your 2 minutes to introduce yourself, tell the group why you're running, why you're the best and candidate for the position. And again, kind of drawing into some of those unique qualities about yourself. And then we'll do that for each of the candidates in the one race. And then I'll kick it over to Luke Korum, who will facilitate some questions, as he mentioned. And it may be questions to both of you. It may be very targeted questions specific to what some of your interests are, to kind of flesh some of that out a little deeper. And then we'll have closing remarks. So each candidate will have 30 seconds to provide closing remarks just following those questions. And then we'll move on to the next race. So easy peasy. I'll mention, each race. Happy to have today with us in the 25th Legislative District, House Representative Cyndy Jacobsen. Her opponent today, Cameron Severns, was not able to make it. We have in the 25th Legislative District, her House seatmate, Kelly Chambers. Jamie Smith is her opponent and also declined the offer to come today. Pierce County Council, District 5, we've got Councilman Marty Campbell and opponent Dailey, Slotnick, both on today. So anxious to hear from both of you. We have Pierce County Council District 1 with County Councilman Dave Morrell and Timothy Tooker, both in the House today. And then Legislative District 31st for the state Senate race, Senator Fortunato and opponent Chris Vance. In the 31st Legislative District, House Representative Drew Stokesbury, whose opponent declined today. And then last but not least, 31st District State Representative Eric Robertson with his opponent, Carrie Wilbur, this morning. So again, grateful that you're all here today for this conversation. I think we will just go ahead and kick this off. So House Representative Cyndy Jacobsen, you've got about 2 minutes to introduce yourself and tell the group why you're running and why you're the best candidate.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you for everything you've done for the Puyallup Sumner Chamber of Commerce. We really appreciate our chamber. Good morning. I have lived in Puyallup 35 years, and we have 11 grandkids and raised our 7 kids here in Puyallup. And the reason that I'm not retiring and taking up gardening is because we still have work to do. So public safety comes to the forefront. And the reason that I mention public safety is it has been such a big problem for our businesses. In 2021, we passed a suite of laws that basically handcuffed our police. They're not able to pursue, and arguably, because of this inability to pursue suspects, there's been deaths even and dire consequences. So this is really an important issue. Since 2018, we've passed 17 laws weakening criminal penalties. And that's not the direction we need to go. We're having a literal crime wave. Another area that affects our businesses and affects everybody really is climate change. We have got to make sure that we are good stewards of our environment, but we've got to do a cost-benefit analysis on what we're doing. We have had virtually no benefit in Washington from the hundreds of millions of dollars that we've spent on this topic. And Washington only generates 0.5% of the global warming problem. And we haven't moved the needle on that. In 2016, we were offered, and I wasn't in yet, but we were offered a revenue neutral cap and trade program, and we didn't take it. Instead, in 2022, we passed a cap and trade that is not revenue neutral, that's going to harm families, that's going to cost them more money on their heating bills. And California was the first to implement this, and they've had virtually no reductions. So not only is it going to cost our families and our businesses, but it's not helped. One way we can help is not by doing things that cost like $200 per metric ton for rooftop solar. One way we can help is to do things that do make sense, which is basically one thing that does make sense is forest management. We spend billions each year on this, and trees sequester carbon. And so a bad wildfire season can put as much carbon into the atmosphere as the whole transportation sector for the whole year. So we need to take a look at that. We don't need to copy California anymore. We don't need to have their low carbon fuel standard like we've got. That's going to cost us 46 cents a gallon at the pumps. That's going to cost people and businesses, and diesel is even more. So that's going to raise prices. We don't need to copy California about banning sales of non-electric vehicles after 2035. We don't need to copy them by doing that. We need to make sure that life is affordable here for folks. And we need to make sure the Washington CARES Act was insolvent before it even began. And we bumped that out till after the election. So we need to take care of that next session. Last session, we had a $15 billion surplus, and we spent every dime, and we raised taxes to boot. So we've got to make life more affordable for families and businesses, and we've got to have balance in Olympia. And I don't know if that was 2 minutes or more.
You're fine. So go ahead, Luke. Thank you.
So I have 2 questions for you, Representative Jacobsen. So the first one has to do with B&O tax. I noticed on your website, on your campaign website, you talked about your sponsor on HB 1012, I believe, providing tax credits for businesses in this state. How did that turn out? And does B&O tax ever have a chance to be reduced in our state for businesses?
Well, B&O tax is a tax on revenue for businesses, and it's a tax that some would say is unfair because we have arbitrary rates that we've used for it, and some businesses are hit harder than others, and we've used it to fund pet projects like raising it for education, which is arguably a good purpose, but we haven't used the money in a way that was responsible enough, because we haven't required that people enroll in the programs that we wanted them to. So I forget the question, Luke, I'm sorry.
How did that bill you sponsored churn out, that HB 212? It was providing tax credits as tax credit business
for the data center.
Oh, maybe I got it mixed up, but it was just something as one of the bills you sponsored. And does B&O tax ever have a chance to be reduced in our state for small business?
Well, I hope that we can. I hope that we can reduce taxes in some form. Again, we spent a big surplus and we didn't reduce taxes. Instead, we raised them. So I hope that we can. I hope that we can provide a business environment that is reasonable and fair for everyone. And yes, I hope that we can.
Okay. And then the next one, you've been in the state representatives now for a few years. What's been your biggest learning lesson being in the minority?
Well, I've been in during COVID for 2 years, and my biggest hassle with it, and I'm looking forward to meeting in person, the biggest lesson that I've had is that during COVID, we weren't able to do our jobs effectively. We weren't able to meet with people as much as we wanted to. We weren't able to meet face to face with other legislators. And when I was on city council, that was our superpower together as a council. As we met together, we worked it out. Well, I wasn't given that chance because I was on Zoom and didn't know any of the people. So I'm looking forward to working in person. And something that I learned is that we never, ever, ever want to do this kind of a lockdown again.
Yes. Well, good. So that's the 2 questions I had for you. So I'll pass it back to Tara.
Awesome. Thank you. Always fun to start first thing in the morning. Good morning. I love it. Well, let's move on. Representative Kelly Chambers, your 2 minutes have started. Hello.
Good morning. Good morning, Tara. Good morning, everyone. See so many familiar faces here. So great to see everyone this morning. Thanks for joining in. I'm Kelly Chambers, State Representative representing the 25th Legislative District. I've had the honor of serving as your representative for the last 4 years and am seeking another re-election. I'm also a small business owner, which is why chambers and small business are a huge passion of mine. I've said many times that I want the 25th Legislative District and the whole state of Washington to be a great place to live, work, and raise a family. And so that's why I've thrown my hat in the ring. You know, I'm a wife and a mom and a new grandmother. And, you know, I just see a lot of things happening in our state that give me reason for concern that Washington is becoming less of a place where you want to raise your family. And when you're really thinking about those future generations, you know, are we going in the right direction? At the same time, I've said over and over again that we need more people in the legislature in Olympia that have actually ran a business, because quite frankly, so many of our electeds down there haven't ran a business, and they really don't understand the impact of some of these well-meaning policies have on our ability as business owners and job creators to create jobs in our community and to serve the people in our communities. So, you know, I was just down with the chamber on the Gilbert, Arizona trip, and it's just an amazing story because you can see how that city down there is a great example of, you know, reducing regulation that really spurs development and creating vibrant, livable communities. And we have such a gem here in Puyallup and in the 25th Legislative District. I want to do what I can to enhance that, to, you know, reduce regulation that just spurs the you know, excitement and vibrancy that private investment and small business can bring to a community.
Awesome. I see we have your husband on the line. I'm wondering if we should be asking for an endorsement there. Hi, Jeff. Good morning. Hey, great. Go ahead, Luke. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Representative Chambers. So my first question for you is on your website, on your campaign website, your base statement is creating, and you kind of touched on this just a minute ago, but is creating policies that create jobs and ease burdens on small business owners. How have you done that in the last few years?
Somebody's running the water. Thanks, Luke. Yeah, I work in long-term care. And so, just as one example is, we have a taxed healthcare system. We don't have enough medical credentialed professionals. So that impacts, the health system from the top on down. So I passed the psychology compact, for example, one bill that enters Washington into a compact with 34 other states, in which it just expands patient access to providers. So there's not enough to go around. We're kind of working that pipeline by creating a teaching hospital up at UW for psychologists. But in the meantime, we can give people in Washington that need greater access to providers the access they need by participating in a compact like that. At the same time, unfortunately this year I had a bill that moved out of the House but didn't go anywhere in the Senate. And that's where I think relationships are important. Since session has ended, I've been able to work with and talk to some senators in the other chamber about the need for getting more caregivers into the long-term care system. The reality is right now, so many of our hospitals have patients there that they can't discharge because there's not enough staffing at nursing homes. There's not enough staffing in home care. There's not enough staffing in long-term care facilities to get those patients where they need to be. And they wind up staying in a facility at a higher cost because we don't have those caregivers down the line. So I've proposed a bill to just increase the amount of time that caregivers have to renew their license. What we've seen in the last 2 years with COVID is a lot of medical professionals have retired. Some people have left their industries for whatever reason. And if we can make it a little bit easier for those trained, qualified, experienced professionals to come back into the workforce, I think that would serve the whole system very well.
Thank you. And then the second question, and you kind of touched on this, but you've sponsored many bills and co-sponsored many bills since you've been down at Olympia. What particular bill are you most proud of that has to do with small business?
I guess it'd be the license plate bill. So I think, a license plate is not an earth-shattering thing. Let's be real about that. However, originally I just thought, Oregon has a Oregon wine country bill and Washington has a big, robust wine industry. Let's do something to honor that. But it really became more than that because the money that's raised by that license plate, first of all, it unlocks matching funds through appropriation. So it's kind of like doubling your money and more bang for your buck. But at the same time, that money is going back into marketing tourism in and around Washington state. And for me, that's kind of the important piece is that helps, Main Street businesses, mom and pop businesses that we all rely on people coming, visiting, shopping, spending, eating in our communities. And this is a vehicle to help that happen. So I did all the footwork on that. Lots of people introduce license plate bills, but they don't come with the petition of signatures. So I was able to gather over 4,000 signatures of support for that bill and to get it through. So it was really, I'd say, a grassroots effort, literally knocking on doors. And I would sit here at night in my recliner and email wineries and say, hey, can you get on board with this? And grape growers and just every association I could to build support for that bill. So it's supported across the state by the tourism industries, your chambers, and all the wine folks from the marketing, the side, the grape growers, the distributors. Everybody was pretty happy to see this go through, and it will be available for purchase by the public in November.
Great. Well, thank you. That's the two questions from me. I'll hand it back to Tara.
Great. And I apologize, Representative Jacobsen. I forgot the 30-second wrap up at the end there. So I am going to remember to do that now with you, Representative Chambers.
Okay. Just want to say thanks for the opportunity to present today and to ask for your ongoing support as your representative. You know, I do love small business and am excited about all the members in the chamber and everything that everyone is doing to ensure we have a vibrant, livable community here in the 25th Legislative District. So appreciate your ongoing support.
Thank you.
Oh, I am unmuted. Sorry about that. All right. Well, thank you. I would now like to kick us over to County Councilman. I believe we have Marty Campbell. Looks like you're in your car there. In your Tesla, if I may add.
Yes, I am parked up here on South Hill.
Nice. Well, hey, I know you had a tight schedule, so thanks for making time today. And why don't you go ahead and take 2 minutes to introduce yourself?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. Marty Campbell, Pierce County Council, District number 5, and I am running for re-election. A little bit about me that people may not know. I was actually born on a small farm outside Omaha, Nebraska. Made my way up here to the Northwest, where at the age of 23, I opened up first of 2 small businesses that were very successful. In 2005, the Tacoma-Pierce County Chamber that I was active in asked me to be part of their leadership group. And through their leadership group, I learned how much more connected we are through business. And that got me thinking about running for public office. Opportunity came up on Tacoma City Council. I ran again, got elected to Tacoma City Council, where I served for 8 years, chairing our economic development subcommittee and representing a lot of the needs of small businesses and bringing that voice to the city council. 4 years ago, I was elected to Pierce County Council, where I think we've been doing a great job, pandemic aside. But during the pandemic, we had the CARES Act funding come up. And one of the first things, even before CARES Act came up, our council immediately put money aside for food distribution, because we knew that making sure that our food banks being well stocked was important, and a program to help out small businesses. That was before CARES Act was even created. Once CARES Act came down, we actually did a really good job working. Councilmember Morrell and I worked closely on several small business bills to make sure that we were addressing the unique needs of small businesses during the pandemic. In the end, we were recognized as one of the top 5 counties in the nation for the way that we balanced both the public health needs of the pandemic, but ensuring economic activity and security during the same time. I'm running for re-election, and because we've got a lot of things we still need to keep working on. Homelessness, housing, increasing inflation. How are we going to work on a lot of these? We've been working pretty hard on really with homelessness, putting aside $253 million. Talk about that more if we want, addressing affordable housing, but also making sure that we're getting government out of the way when we can, because we shouldn't be the reason why inflation is increasing. So thank you very much for having me here today, and I look forward to more discussion.
Excellent. And your opponent today, hey, the power of pink, right? Good morning, Nancy Slotnick. Why don't we go ahead and hear from your 2-minute introduction?
Thank you, Tara, and thank you to the Chamber. I've been a resident of Pierce County since 1987 when I came here to serve on Fort Lewis, and a resident of my home here in Pierce County's 5th District for 30 years. I'm a 25-year military veteran, and I raised my 4 adult children here. My husband and I have owned a small business in Pierce County for over 20 years. And over the 30 years that of watching steady progress on crime rates here in Pierce County, I've watched with alarm in the last few years as we've returned to record crime levels. And I'm running because we must get that crime trend turned around. And I'm not going to pretend that's going to be easy. We've reversed 30 years of progress in the last 2 years. But we have to do the work and make the decisions to get it headed back in the right direction. And as a former Army recruiter, I know that it takes more than just bonuses and benefits packages to recruit people to do jobs that involve running towards danger to protect others. So I'm willing to do that work to show our police how much we need and appreciate them. But in addition to keeping our community safe, we have to make transportation improvements that reduce congestion, improve safety, and connect our economic centers. And in recent weeks, I watched our county council, including Councilmember Campbell, take a party line vote against applying for a federal grant under the Infrastructure Investment Act that would bring 30 million federal tax dollars back to our community to complete the Canyon Road Regional Connection Project. This critical project to improve our transportation has been planned for over 3 decades, and we've already invested over $130 million in improving and widening Canyon Road. The refusal to apply for the grant jeopardizes the 2 final phases of this project. The first of those provides a grade separation and improved safety at a high-risk rail crossing next to Chief Leshai's School. And the second would replace the inadequate Milroy Bridge with a modern bridge that went directly onto 70th Avenue East that will improve connections between the port, I-5, 167, and our economic centers in Fife and Frederickson. So as your county council member, I will strive to prepare our county for both an economically and environmentally healthy future. And I'll always remember that elected office is first and foremost about service to our community.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm sure County Councilman Campbell may be in our questionnaire, may be able to answer some of that debate there. All right, Luke.
Yes, thank you. So this first question is for Council Member Campbell. So with our county growing so rapidly, what is the biggest obstacle for small business?
That's a great question. I mean, I think the obstacle for small businesses right now is recruiting good employees. We're seeing this when I talk to small business owners all the time. They talk about their ability to attract and retain employees. This is up and down, systemic all over. I serve on the board of Workforce Central, where we work at preparing us for the workforce of tomorrow, making sure that we're bringing the training programs into Pierce County and adding additional, and then connecting people who might be looking for a job with the jobs that we have here in Pierce County. So I think it's really workforce development is one of the biggest challenges that I'm hearing from small businesses. The other thing we need to make sure is that we're providing access to county government. This last year, we actually launched a BIPOC incubator to help small businesses that are starting with leadership and understanding and mentorship. Just recently, the executive informed me we received an international award for the program of Small Business Accelerator that we're running here at Pierce County. Something we launched coming out of the pandemic that helped hundreds of small businesses across the county achieve their goal of entrepreneurship and succeed.
Thank you. And Nancy, I'm going to ask you the same question. So I'll say it one more time. So with the county growing so rapidly, what is the biggest obstacle right now for small businesses?
Well, I would definitely concur that finding good employees is part of that problem. And I think that part of the problem is that what we refer to as the Great Resignation, this 2-year lockdown that we've engaged in has really impacted the mental health of our potential workers. We have a lot of people who are dealing with so much anxiety that they're afraid to go back into the workforce. And so we have to deal with that problem so that we can encourage people just to get back to work. We have a lot of qualified people out there who right now aren't working because they just aren't sure how to cope with getting back into the workforce. I also think that taxation is a huge issue, and just the things to encourage small businesses to operate with lower taxes, better benefits, and also we've closed down a lot of businesses because of public safety. We have businesses right downtown Tacoma that are literally closing because they don't feel safe, because they don't have police support. So those are all things that are critical.
Thank you. And this next question is for you again, Nancy. So you're a veteran, as you mentioned. Thank you for your service. And your family seems to be a shining example of post-military life. What ways do you think you could help other military families as a county councilman?
Oh, wow. We definitely need to improve the way we deal with our veterans right now. We've got so many people with PTSD, but also just making those transitions from military life to civilian life. I know that when I came out of the military, understanding what skills you're bringing to the workforce are critical. And so all those things like vocational rehabilitation and PTSD treatment. We also have some great things going on already at the county with things like the therapeutic courts to help people who are dealing with mental health issues as they come out of the military, so that we don't put them into the criminal justice system because of things that are related to their military service.
Thank you. And my last question is for Councilmember Campbell. So on your campaign website, you mentioned more than once livable neighborhoods. I saw that probably referenced more than any other term on your site. What does that mean to you?
Livable neighborhoods is we want to make sure we're not building a county that is a suburb to King County, that it's where people come home to lay their heads so that they can get back to work the next day. We want communities that people can live, work, and play in. Make sure that they're have access to parks, that their neighborhoods are ones that they feel safe walking and biking around in, that we have jobs, good living wage jobs here in Pierce County, so that they're not spending most of their time commuting to jobs somewhere else. Making sure that we have all the services that you need, and it's that requires intentional planning at the county level, making sure, and recruiting to make sure that we're bringing the right businesses and services in to support people in the neighborhoods in which they live, and supporting those businesses to succeed. It also is about creating a culture of entrepreneurship, making sure that people have the opportunity to seek business ownership if that's what they want and succeed. Again, we know that when we open up small businesses in our communities, people become known for communities become known for their small businesses. No one travels and talks about a great sandwich they had at that Subway restaurant. They talk about a great restaurant that they visited, or a small entrepreneur or shop that they visited. And that's what helps build the identity. So livable neighborhoods have their own identity, and they're a place where people are proud to say that they're from.
Thank you. And that completes my questions for this round. So I'll hand it back to Tara.
Great. We're doing so great on our agenda here that, I appreciate that Nancy, sort of followed my suit and that, asking to maybe draw out any differences. And so certainly bringing out a difference that sounds like you would have voted one way versus County Councilman Campbell. I'd like to go ahead, if you don't mind, Councilman Campbell, just have an opportunity to kind of maybe provide a reason behind that vote for yourself.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity. The vote was looking at a grant for the Canyon Road Northerly Extension. Actually, only one half of it. This wouldn't impact the replacement at the Milroy Bridge, which must move ahead. But when we look at the segment that is crossing over the rural separator and through our agricultural lands, Nancy's right. We have spent $100 million on this. And accepting this grant kicks off another $300 to $400 million in committed expenditures. And taking a pause before we say we spent $10, before we spend 40 more, let's take a pause and make sure it's what we want to do and that it's being done right. 1995, when this was all thought of, this was sure a good idea. Some things that exist now didn't exist then. Agritourism. If you've been out into the Puyallup Valley in the last week, you know that literally the roads are crawling with tens of thousands of people down there at the pumpkin patches and corn mazes. That didn't exist in 1995, so they're going to run a road through there. If that becomes a 5-lane road running in front of Strino's and Pica Farms, that's going to impact the 200 employees that work at those businesses significantly. That may, it's going to make having those pumpkin patches and corn mazes a lot more difficult. So before we commit, we had, they asked the council to take 48 hours to decide whether or not we wanted to embark on this entire next phase that's going to impact many small businesses and the quality of life in the entire lower Puyallup Valley, to take a pause and say, let's look at this next year. It's a renewing grant every year. We can apply next year. My other criticism is we were allowed to ask for an up to 80% match on it. Get the federal government to pay for 80%. This segment's about $100 million. Instead, the county came in asking for $25 million, 25% match, saying we'll just pull the rest out of local funds, out of transportation impact fees. I want to keep transportation impact fees as low as possible and make sure that we're getting the most that we can from the federal government. Why can't we ask for 50 or 75 million? Why should we only settle for 25 or 30 million? We shouldn't. And so we need to get it right. We need to protect the businesses that are there, and we need to make sure that we're getting the full financial funding that we can from the federal government. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, thank you for taking the time to elaborate on that. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and, just for the sake of bouncing back and forth a little bit, go ahead and let Nancy provide her 30 seconds of closing commentary, and then we'll come back to you, County Councilman. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity, for all the chamber does for our community. And I will definitely say that most of the land for that project has already been acquired. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there. And also that Councilmember Campbell seems to want it both ways. We want more money, but we don't want to complete the project. So I hear what I hear is wishy-washiness about this project, and I don't see how the Milroy Bridge portion of that project continues without finishing that part that joins it together. So I think it's critical, and it jeopardizes the future of that project. And as your council member, I will always remember that my first responsibility is to serve our community, not to exert power over our community. And public safety, transportation, and fiscal responsibility will be my top priorities.
Thank you for that. All right, County Councilman Campbell.
Thank you. This seems to be an area of debate. The Milroy Bridge currently exists without the connection there, and so the need to replace it will serve what the Milroy Bridge already serves. And I don't want to have it both ways. We need to have a connection across there. Just if we can do it without harming the businesses that exist there, that would be great. Thank you all very much for having me out here. First and foremost, I want to make sure that I am accessible, listening. And so if you ever have a question about it, feel free to call me and I will explain where we're at, and we're happy to talk with you. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Hey, that's just a big part of it, right? Just that availability and having access. So please do take him up on that. I implore all of you to do that if need be with any of our representatives. All right. So let's go ahead and move over to County Councilman. We have Dave Morrell, I believe. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll introduce your opponent, Timothy Tooker. Good morning, Dave.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Tara.
You bet.
Nice to see you, Luke. My name's Dave Morrell. I am the current county council person for District 1, which takes in basically all of East Pierce County, which is a very unique district. It's a mix of suburban and rural small towns. I've had the privilege of getting to know each of my communities over the last 4 years. I have lived on South Hill for, 50 years. So I've seen a lot of change up here. I am engaged in my community. I have always been engaged. I was a fire commissioner for Central Pierce Fire and Rescue for 15 years. And then I've been on just about every board that the county has, park, airport, land use boards, and I've been a state representative. I've owned a commercial construction company up here, award-winning commercial construction company for the last 40 plus years, and still enjoy actively getting out there with the guys and pulling concrete hose and meeting real people on job sites. So my priorities are pretty much the same as when I was elected 4 years ago: public safety, economic development, transportation, improving our trail systems and our parks, and supporting my small towns and cities. So with that, that's my introduction. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and to answer any questions Luke may throw at me.
Well, thank you, County Councilman Morrell. And good morning, Tim Tooker. I'm anxious to learn more about you and understand what ways you're compelled to run. So let's go ahead and do your 2-minute introduction. And thank you so much for participating today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And thank you, the council, for having me here to speak with you guys. I'm a 20-year veteran. I retired in 2017 from the United States Army. I've spent my entire adult life hunting terrorists and bad guys and defending the people of the United States. When I got out, I started getting involved in the Republican Party. And I realized just how corrupt the Republican Party is, to include our representatives, Chambers, Jacobson, Morrell, and then they're selling you guys out. Dave Morrell voted for the Green New Deal. That is going to hurt businesses. And anybody who says it's not is not paying attention. He also voted for the Equity Index, which is a racist piece of legislation. So nobody was standing up for the people. So somebody has to stand up and start speaking truth and try to bring truth and transparency back to our politics, I guess, and the people who help us. I really would like to serve no more than one term. And I hope that, if God puts me in that seat, that I will do a good job, and that somebody will come up and they can ride with me and they can run the next election. I'm here to serve the people. I'm here to try to audit the government as much as possible and find out, because we're paying a lot of money in tax money. Bruce Dammeier brags that 60% of Pierce County's budget is from property tax. That's outrageous. And that is stealing the people's money. That needs to stop. Thank you very much.
All right. Compelled for a number of reasons. So thank you for, again, your candor. Appreciate it. All right. Well, let's go ahead and start our Q&A with Luke.
Thank you. So this first question is for Councilman Morrell. So crime is listed as your #1 priority on your campaign website. How have you helped solve this while in office?
I think the biggest thing that I can do is obviously support our fine men, women that deal with law enforcement, both at the deputy level and at the correction level. And I agree with what Representative Jacobson said, that this is also a societal problem, and we're not going to solve it anytime soon. The county has to deal with these laws that come down from the state under the kind of the shroud of social justice. I think the pendulum swung way too far, and we are now seeing the results of that. Armed robbery is up 105% in Pierce County. Motor vehicle thefts are up 111%. Vandalism is up 30%. So what we need to do is get more officers on the streets and have a better presence to try to build the morale back within our sheriff's department, and just move forward. Every ride along that I go on, I get a different perspective on through the eyes of these officers, what they have to deal with nowadays, and it's challenging. I don't know if I would choose a career in law enforcement right now, but hopefully we can change that and show that Pierce County supports our first responders, and we'll continue to support them, and not only in words, but in new contracts we just passed in the last month. So that's kind of the track that I'm going down. Thank you.
Thank you. And this question's for Timothy. Timothy, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you, sir.
It's the same question asked Nancy. So you're a veteran, as you mentioned. Thank you for your service. What ways do you think you could help other military or post-military families as a county councilman?
Well, that's a very broad question, sir, because there's many sectors to that. So if we're talking about business, As far as business, the problem is nobody teaches correct finance. So one of the simplest things you could give to somebody is, I don't know if you guys have ever read the book Profit First. So Profit First teaches businesses how to save their tax money and to make sure that they're getting paid, so that way they put food on the table and keep lights on. So for veterans, I think the biggest thing we can do is education, as far as how to run a business, how to get it set up, you know, what to look for, what obstacles are going to come, and what obstacles they're going to have in their business life. I own multiple businesses. So 3 years prior to retiring, I started 3 businesses because I knew that I didn't want to continue working in the government. And so I've experienced a lot, from construction to lending, and all of our companies are in real estate. So I've experienced a huge amount of differences when dealing with the government. I think the best thing we can do is education, and then also providing them with the resources to start a business. You know, most people get out, they don't know how to set up a website. They don't know how to set up a social media site. And these are very simple things that we have great people in the community, especially like the Chamber of Commerce, where they could sit down and they could learn these basics to get started. And that would put them on a path towards, you know, being able to provide for their families. They don't have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can start a business with a little bit of money and then grow it, and then it's yours.
Thank you. And then this question's for you as well, Timothy. So like I asked the other people in this position, so the county, we have one of the fastest growing, Pierce County is one of the fastest growing in the nation. How do you see this impact on us overall, including small business?
Well, I think you guys got a good idea of what Pierce County is going to do for small business during the pandemic of COVID, right? They shut your businesses down. They made it difficult for you to put food on the table. They didn't shut down the big corporations. They didn't shut down the government agencies, because remember, the Republicans were talking about we're going to have, the Democrats were saying that we were going to have a shortfall in the budget. And then miraculously, we had a lot of money in the budget left over because they kept the government up and running. They made it. Chris Gildon said the huge amount of money they made was from the excise tax and selling real estate. The government's not dumb. They're going to make their money. So for small businesses, we have to reduce liabilities. And none of the current representatives that you have, any of them, have made a real effort to reduce property taxes, B&O tax, L&I, none of them. Matter of fact, they let the health department and L&I brutalize our people during the COVID. Nobody stood up for them. So we have to start standing up for the people. We have to reduce the liabilities and allow for them to provide for their families.
Thank you, Timothy. Last question is for Dave. Dave, this kind of goes down the lines of tax revenue. You mentioned on your campaign website, mentioned tax revenue, using tax revenue effectively and focusing on resources on roads and public safety. Have you done this? How have you done this in office?
Actually, you know, if you compare our budget to other budgets, you can actually compare our budgets to the city of Tacoma. We are very fiscally conservative at the county. We continue under the leadership of Bruce Dienmeyer to have a 15% surplus at all times, because we learned after the 2008 recession that we need to do a better job budgeting. So we always look at our priorities as a council and decide how to fund things. You know, Mr. Tooker was correct that we as a county do not have a lot of the taxation mechanisms that cities have. So we have to operate off property taxes. That's the only income stream we have, other than a small percentage of sales tax and the fees that we as county government charge, and also the road levy fees. So we have to be responsible with our money. 78% of every dollar goes to the criminal justice system. That includes the Sheriff's Department, corrections, the courts. So that doesn't give us a whole lot of funds to deal with all the other challenges that a growing county has. But I think up until now, we've done a very good job as a business owner, being able to have a critical eye when it comes to putting together a budget and understanding that, you know, a dollar has to be earned first to be spent. So anyway, that's kind of the tack that I take every time, and making sure that, you know, of course, District 1 is representative in those budgets. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to both of you. And I'll hand it back to Tara.
Yeah, again, thank you. You know, clearly frustration, I know, you know, with Tim Tooker, and I get it. I mean, I think as the voice of business here, you know, our chamber community has been very frustrated the last couple of years, you know, with the unprecedented amount of time that our executive decision or authority was given to our governor to shut our businesses down. So I think it's left a lot of the other agencies certainly grappling, but I assure you there's allies here that was equally frustrating. But again, you're running because you're compelled, and that's what democracy is. And so I appreciate your candor today. And I'm going to let you go ahead, Tim Tooker, and take 30 seconds to wrap us up.
Yeah, I just want a couple of things. Dave talked about 15% of the budget is left over in surplus. That's $450 million. Why are you still collecting taxes? Why are you still collecting B&O? You are stealing from the people. The same people you sit up here and you talk about you're trying to help. You are stealing their money. They can figure out how to best spend their money, what to buy with that money, instead of you coming back with some program for $5,000 for a small business. And if you look at the budget, guys, if you actually go and look at it, they're still spending almost, what, 70 million on COVID. Yet they're talking about we're trying to help small businesses. COVID, it's over, guys. The hoax is up. Stop it. Start getting the money back to the people. Start saving them. Now, the Democrats are pushing socialism, guys. Socialism is the little brother of communism. That's what's coming for you here. If you guys don't start waking up and actually putting people into office that are going to fight for you. May God bless each and every one of you and protect you during these trying times. But if you guys don't start waking up and start speaking truth, your children are going to be slaves. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you again. All right. County Councilman Morrell, 30 seconds to wrap up.
Thank you, Tara. I, again, appreciate the opportunity to come before the chamber as a member. I've appreciated the work that the chamber has done. And, you know, I like Mr. Tooker was very frustrated for the last 2 years. And it's been really interesting to try to navigate a lot of the landmines that have been out there. I think as a county, Pierce County has showed itself that we did do pushback against the state and against our governor for some of the mandates that he put forward. But all in all, I think the county has done very well over the last 4 years. I've enjoyed my time there. Sure, it's frustrating at times, but my outlook is always one of being positive and working to make our communities a more vibrant, livable community, as has been stated before. And so, you know, when I go out and talk to folks, sure, there are some frustrations, but the reality is we just got to, you know, get up in the morning and do our job and do the best job we can. And I just want to provide an environment where people can thrive, especially businesses in our county. The more jobs we bring here, the better off we are. And I am constantly working on economic development and trying to increase our job bases as well as bring leading edge companies to Pierce County. So thank you. Appreciate it. Everyone have a great day out there.
Terrific. Well, thank you both. Appreciate you both being here. I am now going to move over to the 31st District and welcome Representative Drew Stokesbury. Great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you, Tara.
All right. We're going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself. You got 2 minutes. Tell us why you're still willing to fight the good fight.
Yeah, well, again, thank you, Tara and the Chamber for bringing us all together today. Really appreciate the opportunity. And good to see a lot of familiar faces here. For those who I haven't had the chance to meet yet, I'm Drew Stokesbury. I represent the 31st Legislative District in Olympia. I live in Auburn, but my office is right down there on 1003 Main Street in downtown Sumner. So Sumner is near and dear to my heart, and glad to have it in the 31st District. I am at the end of my 4th term in Olympia. For the past 2 terms, I have served the House Republican Caucus as the ranking member on the House Appropriations Committee. So I have spent most of my time dealing with the state budget. I learned probably in my first week in Olympia that there's really 3 kinds of bills. There are good ideas that are free, there's good ideas that cost money, and there's bad ideas. And the good ideas that are free, somebody older and smarter than me has already put them into law. So all we're left with are good ideas that are competing for the limited amount of money that we have, and bad ideas. So my job is to try to stop as many of the bad things as I can and try to figure out the best way to prioritize our limited resources. Our resources haven't been that limited, though. The budget has nearly doubled since I was first elected. We have made some good investments, including into K-12 education, finally funding the Working Families Tax Credit, which is a sales tax rebate program. But the state has unfortunately spent a lot of money on programs that are maybe well-intentioned, but another lesson I've learned is that good intentions don't automatically make good policies. So running for another 2 years to continue to help do what I can to steer the state budget in a responsible direction. Also want to make sure I am able to continue to help my community that I love so much. Public safety is a topic that a couple other candidates have spoken about. That's obviously a deep concern for both families and businesses. Businesses having to deal with some of the crime fallout. But public safety is a big one. K-12 education has been a top priority of mine since I first ran in 2014 and had a newborn baby. And now that newborn baby is in 3rd grade, and I've got a 1st grader and a 1-year-old. So public education has only become more important to me. So anyway, hope to return for another 2 years to continue to do some good work and do some things, and hopefully hopefully my caucus has a few more seats than we have had the past few years. And look forward to taking on some questions.
Awesome. Thank you. And Chris Vance, good morning. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the group?
You bet, but are you sure you're in the right order here? Because I'm not running against Representative Stokesbury.
Yeah, we could just do Representative Stokesbury because he's by himself, and then jump back up to the state senate.
This is thank you, Senator Fortunato. Yes. I was looking for who the main
Yeah
was. This is true. You do not have an opponent unless Chris is straddling here.
We just jumped in.
No, I like Drew. I wouldn't run against Drew.
My apologies. Thanks, Luke. All right, well, then let's go back to some questions here for Drew.
All right. Representative Stokesbury, nice to meet you. I have to say you have the best campaign website. I went through all these last night, and yours was most up to date, and you had the most relevant information. So thank you for that. That was a good site. So, but one of the things I noticed on there that I thought was worth mentioning today was you had 100% National Federation of Independent Business rating, or NFIB for short. How did you do that?
You know, Appreciate the question. I was talking to a government affairs person down in Olympia who works for a different trade association, not NFIB, and I had a 90-something% voting record with that group, and I was teasing him that I felt that they were on the wrong side of one issue that I voted against their association on, and he said, "No, it's good. You don't ever want to be 100% beholden to anybody." And I agree with that. So, but I if there's any group I'm going to be 100% aligned with, NFIB is a pretty good one to be 100% aligned with. I learned early on down in Olympia that there are going to be a lot of people giving you a lot of reasons to vote one way or another, and the lobbyists down there are all really good at what they do, and they're paid handsomely because they're so good at convincing folks. So you certainly got to rely on them for some information and perspective, but at the end of the day, you got to do what you think is right and what you think is best for the state and the people you represent. And so luckily that some of the bills that dealt with small businesses this past year, it was pretty easy for me to get to yes on, and at the end of the day, ended up having a 100% voting record for small business. I mean, it's no secret. I'm preaching to the choir here, but small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and there's a lot more that I wish could be done. But of the few bills that did come up for a vote on the floor this year, was happy to be able to side with small business on all of them.
Thank you. My next and last question for you just has to do with public safety. You mentioned at the end of when you opened up here, just your thoughts on how's the climate going to be in the next 2 years while in office, and do you see a reversal of this? Obviously, small businesses are being affected. Businesses like ours, we've had to hire 7 days a week, private security, things like that we never thought we'd have to do. Just your thoughts on all that.
Yeah, I can be a little bit more candid here because this is a campaign event and no taxpayer dollars are being used to put this on. But, I think the answer to that question depends a lot on the outcome of November's elections. We, unfortunately, the past couple of years have entered an era of hyper-partisanship, and I expect we'll hear a little bit more about this when we get to the Senate debate. But one of the unfortunate realities of that is it has been my sense down in Olympia that voting has become much more partisan and much more politicized. And there was a cohort of the majority caucus who really wanted to enact various changes to how police do their jobs, how they're trained, and what happens when they fail. And while there were certainly some good and worthy intentions driving that change, I think that change went far too much in the wrong direction. And I think it remains to be an open question whether or not there will be votes in the legislature to reverse course a little bit and find some more appropriate middle ground. But the incident we had in Puyallup just a few days after the law took effect, where there was a murder and a suspicious person running around, but police couldn't give chase because they only had reasonable suspicion and not probable cause that the suspect was connected to the murder, exemplifies everything that was wrong with these policies. So whether or not some of those changes can be reversed, I think is going to depend on the outcomes of the elections. I am proud to be part of the House Republican caucus that voted against all of these changes. And if we have enough votes, we'll undo as many of these changes as we can to get back to a more realistic and useful balance that keeps our community safe, allows businesses to stay open and thrive and not have to worry about shoplifting, but also punishes the bad actors in society who abuse their positions of authority. And I think we can reach that middle ground. The question is whether or not we'll have the political votes to do it.
Thank you. I'll hand it back to Tara.
Gosh, you addressed a lot of important issues very well. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to tell us something maybe we don't know about you or something else you want to throw in that we didn't get to punctuate for you.
I don't know what is not known about me. The unfortunate reality of this job is that you're very public, and I'm not the kind of guy who needs my name attached to a lot of things. I'd much rather have a good policy outcome than credit for anything. But I will share something I alluded to at the beginning, which is something that I'm most proud of in Olympia. As has been alluded to by myself and a few others, we had a really large budget surplus, and it was a huge disappointment that we could not provide, that that there were not enough votes to provide broad-based tax relief. Washington is one of just a tiny handful of states that don't include states like New Jersey, New York, California, Massachusetts, that has not provided broad-based tax relief. However, once it became clear that there was not the political will by the majority to pass some broad-based tax cuts, I did work really hard to fully fund the Working Families Tax Credit, which is a program that has existed in law for about 12 years, but was never funded. It's essentially a sales tax rebate program for low-income Washingtonians. Was able to increase the funding for that, increase the size of the check, and get it funded for the first time in state's history with nearly every Republican supporting it. And I wish we could have given tax relief to everybody, but I think that giving tax relief to some people, the people who need it the most, is better than giving it to nobody. So I was really proud of that, and hope to continue to work to expand that program to apply to more people and give them more tax relief in the future. So with that, again, really appreciate everybody joining us this morning. I can think of some better ways to spend y'all's Tuesday morning than listen to a bunch of politicians, but appreciate you spending it here. Appreciate you, Tara, and the Chamber for organizing this, and go Mariners.
Yes, go Mariners. No, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. So, juggling one screen only. I apologize for getting a little out of order there. But let's go back to Senator Fortunato and his opponent, Chris Vance. So, Senator Fortunato, good morning, and please introduce yourself.
Good morning. Thank you for having us on. And I think it's really, really important that chambers participate in the political process. One of the things that got me involved in politics really was I had a company that planted lawns, some years ago. And in 1992, we had what they called a drought, even though it was 37 inches was normal and 39 was normal, and they called it a drought. But they basically shut the water off. Now, when you plant lawns for a living and they shut the water off, they almost put me out of business. And, this made me sit up and pay attention, because now the government was taking my money and telling people not to buy my product. So that's what got me all, pardon me. That's what got me all involved in politics. But since I've been an adult after 18, I've only actually worked for somebody else for 1 year in my entire adult life. I've signed paychecks for 40 years. So I understand the impact on business from government regulations, unemployment, labor and industries issues, Davis-Bacon issues, and all that stuff. I've been endorsed by, pardon me, I've been endorsed by retailers, the Hospitality Association, auto dealers, NFIB, pardon me, NFIB, King County, Pierce County, Seattle Police Guilds, Fraternal Order of Police. King County Police made me Legislator of the Year for my efforts in law enforcement. I sit on the Transportation Committee, Environment, and I'm a ranking member on Housing. 20 years ago, I was a state rep in the 47th district and served one term. And I sat on the Transportation Committee then. And I said, in the future, people are going to buy more fuel efficient cars. People are going to buy more electric cars. The gas tax revenue is going to flatten out, but the cost of construction is going to go up with inflation, and the cost of right-of-way is going to go up with inflation. So we need an inflation-linked funding source. And that inflation-linked funding source was the state's portion of the sales tax on motor vehicles. If you take the state sales tax on motor vehicles and you stick that into the gas tax account, that line, that gas tax line, which now is flat, would then increase to about a 30-degree angle, which keeps pace with inflation. So at that time, the budget was $26 billion. And the sales tax from the sale of motor vehicles was $512 million. The budget now is 60-some billion dollars. And the sales tax from the sale of motor vehicles is $2.4 billion. I've been running that same bill every year. Different versions, phasing it in, et cetera. If you did that, if you took $2.4 billion out of the budget, which would be roughly 4%, which, by the way, is what other states currently fund their transportation, Idaho, et cetera, you would then put $26 billion into transportation improvements. We desperately need money in our transportation system. Transportation is the lifeblood of our economy. We need to move freight. We are an export driven economy. We need to move stuff from Eastern Washington to the ports, and from the ports back out through the rest of the state. So, and you need to improve. We need bridges. We need a new bridge over the Columbia River. I've been fighting to get a bridge from Enumclaw to Buckley that widen that. And you're actually probably driving on the bridge. I got $500,000 for it to go from on Traffic Avenue there, from Sumner into Puyallup. But by doing that, it would keep $24 billion in taxpayers' pockets. What are they going to do with that $24 billion? They're going to spend it. They're going to invest it. They're going to put it in the bank. They're going to make that money more available for loans. And that would, in effect, return $4.6 billion in sales tax back to the state government. Now, when they sold the 11.9 cent gas tax, they said, if you do this 11.9 cent gas tax, you're going to get all this economic benefit. You're going to get, it's going to stimulate the economy, create jobs and all that stuff. And my comment was, if that's the case, why do you need to raise my taxes? Why aren't you doing that anyway? So if you did take the sales tax, $26 billion, and you apply that same metrics that they use to sell the 11.9 cent gas tax, you get $56 billion in economic growth. So either that's true or they lied to us when they sold the 11.9 cent gas tax. I sit on transportation. I sit on environment. I sit on, I'm the ranking member on housing. I sponsored a bill called the American Dream Home Act. And the purpose of this bill was to be able to put an entry-level house on the market. And that bill was cited by the Association of Washington Cities as the only bill in Olympia that dealt with single-family residences. I want to talk a little bit about what it means to be part of a caucus. If any business owner here was looking at restructuring their business, they were looking at making a major change, I'm sure that they would call in their HR department, they would call in their sales department, they would call in their service departments, and they would say, we are thinking of doing this change. What do you guys think? What's the impact on your different departments? And you would use their impact, their advice in formulating what you're going to try to do. Well, that's the same thing that happens in a caucus. The advantage of being a part of a caucus is that I have expertise in housing. I have expertise in the environment. I have expertise in business. Those are benefits to other members of the caucus that don't have that area of expertise. But I'm not an expert in housing, or I'm not an expert in medical issues, in healthcare issues. I'm not an expert in retirement issues. So I have to rely on the other members of my caucus to get what they think about certain bills. I remember being a novice freshman representative and having some agency come in with an agency request bill. And I looked at that bill and I said, well, this seems reasonable. And I went to a more senior member and I said, well, the agency wants me to sponsor this bill and it looks pretty reasonable. What do you think? And it came back, wow, they've been trying to do that for years. What it really means is this, 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 and this. So being able to rely on somebody else's area of expertise and getting that feedback and making a decision is important. And that's what being a member of the caucus means. So anyway, other than that, I don't really have any opinion on any
Nothing more. Okay. Well, certainly, Senator Fortunato, you are well aligned with the committees you serve on, and all that you've done for transportation in our region is certainly well noted. I'm going to, in all fairness, I know we've, are good on timing, so I'm going to go ahead and certainly allow Chris Vance, if you'd like to take a little bit longer for an introduction, you're more than welcome to do that as well.
Okay. Well, I will take a little more time, but not too much. Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm talking to you today from my house in downtown Sumner. This is home to me. This is where I grew up, Sumner High School class of 1980. Back then, my dad was the general manager of what was then Milam Oldsmobile. So I kind of grew up on Auto Row and around car dealerships. 30 years ago, I represented this district in the House of Representatives as a Republican. Then I went to the King County Council as a Republican. I was the chairman of the Washington State Republican Party, and I was the Republican nominee for the United States Senate in 2016. You know, a lot of people have been in the legislature and left and then come back. I think I'm going to break the record for the longest gap in between, 30 years. But I left the party in 2017 for, I think, very obvious reasons that I've been very public about. And now I'm running for the state Senate as a moderate independent, seeking to become the first independent ever elected to the Washington State Legislature. And I'm doing that because extremism and dangerous anti-democratic ideas and hyper-tribal partisanship that Representative Stokesbury referenced is out of control in our political system. And both parties have let us down. I think both parties have lost their minds. I remember when the two parties were not that far apart, and now it's just insane. And the partisan gamesmanship and the extreme dangerous ideas are preventing us from dealing with the real structural problems that face state government. And I'll give you three. First, we are still far too dependent on local levies to fund our schools. I worked for 8 years for Superintendent of Public Instruction during the height of the McCleary debate, and the legislature has never solved McCleary. We are still way too dependent on levies, which means that schools in the Sumner Bonnie Lake School District get like 25% less funding per child than schools in Seattle or Bellevue or Mercer Island. That's just wrong. It's unconstitutional. I listened to the county council candidates talk about the need to get more Pierce County Sheriff's deputies on the street. I agree. But the only way we're going to do that is if the state of Washington addresses the antiquated and ridiculous way we fund county governments and provide more funding for counties to hire prosecutors, hire sheriff's deputies, run their courts, run their jails, because right now our criminal justice system is falling apart. The King County Jail, up until a few days ago, didn't have any potable water. They don't even have staff to adequately staff that jail. The state has got to fix that. And finally, transportation, where we've got to continue to make investments in transportation. I'm appalled at the lack of transit service here in Pierce County. My district, Bonnie Lake area, to Holly, all of that is exploding. And there's no buses. It's insane. If you go just across the border into King County and you're in Federal Way, there's constantly circulating metro buses that bring people to transit hubs and get them into the regional transportation system. But the growth that Pierce County has allowed way out on the fringes of the urban area with no transit service is just the antithesis of good growth management. So we've got to continue to fund transportation. And that leads me to addressing the senator's idea, if you can call it an idea. And it's a good example of the difference in this race. What he wants to do is divert $26 billion out of the general fund, which funds education, and put it into transportation, with no funding back to help address our schools, which, as I said, are still understaffed, underfunded, and reliant on local levies. My wife is a special education paraeducator in the Auburn School District, and she still has to buy school supplies for her classroom every week. I mean, we still have to address education. We can't take money out of the budget that funds education. And his idea does not fully fund transportation. And finally, and this is really important, that idea is never going to happen. It is never going to pass. And he knows that. And he proposes it as an excuse so that he then can vote no on the transportation package that can pass. And Senator Fortunato has voted against every idea that's come along to actually fund transportation, and then points to his idea of stealing money from education to fund it. So I think we need serious people in public office who propose serious ideas. I've been endorsed by both the Seattle Times and the News Tribune, and the Times summed this up really well when they said, Chris Vance is proven he's a thoughtful lawmaker. Senator Fortunato seems more engaged in fighting the culture war than in terms of effectively legislating. We face real challenges, and we need serious people in office, and we need less partisanship. And I think we need at least one independent to offer an alternative to the crazy two-party system. So thanks for having me, and love to take your questions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Luke.
Morning to both of you, and nice to meet you, Chris. So my first question is to you, Chris. So as you mentioned, you have a long history in politics, in particular this area. Is there a single policy or law that's ever been passed in our state or another that's helped small businesses that you would like to implement?
Well, the biggest problems facing small businesses depend on the nature of the business. The business community is not monolithic. One thing we should look at carefully is our tax structure compared to other states. Our tax structure is the most unfair in the nation, where the less you earn, the more you pay. So it hurts poor people. Yet at the same time, it's very bad for many businesses, including the high sales tax, which dissuades people from purchasing things, and the B&O tax, which is a tax on gross receipts, not net profits. So probably the best thing that we could do to help the business community in this state that would make it look more like other states is comprehensive tax reform to raise some taxes, lower others, change things, and make our tax system more attractive to small business and more fair to all people.
Thank you. And my next question, and the rest of these questions for you guys, all have to do with transportation. So it's came up a lot this morning, especially between you two. So Senator Fortunato, this question is for you. You mentioned transportation as a priority, and you're on the transportation board. As someone in the car industry, we see fees and taxes rising each year, and that's obviously passed on to the customer too. Is it possible to stop these fees? Also, actually, I'll stop at that. Is it possible to stop these fees? And I have a second part of the question for you right after that.
Well, the problem comes in is you have two basic philosophies, and I think Chris pointed to one of them when he says Senator Fortunato wants to take the money out of the general fund, but has no way of replacing it. And the question comes in is when you have a $15 billion surplus, why in the world do you need to raise another tax to replace it? You always hear this. You want to take the money out of transportation and stick it into, or out of the general fund and stick it into transportation. And how are you going to pay for it is the response. Well, you are experiencing how they are going to pay for it. They just raised every fee imaginable on cars and registrations and driver's licenses and every other aspect, $16 billion in increased fees. And again, that takes money out of taxpayers' pockets. So how do you reverse that? The Republicans put together a budget, which, by the way, included the sales tax from the sale of motor vehicles, balanced the budget, funded education, did that without raising any of those fees. So as long as the other party is in the majority, that's what you can expect. So, and there's only really two votes that matter. And that's who you're going to vote for the majority and the budget. And my opponent has already said that he would vote to give the Democrats the majority, which, by the way, is the ball game. They would control everything. They control what bills get heard, what bills come to the floor for a vote, et cetera. So if you don't want more fees, I'm your guy. And the way to do that is to roll that back by changing the majority if you have one House, Senate, or the House, for example, in the legislature, you can't pass things, but you could stop things. So.
Thank you. And then the second part of the questions for you, Senator Fortunato, has to do with electric cars. As someone in the industry, there's a demand for it. We're not naturally watching these cars go up in sales, but the state, our state, wants to mandate it by 2030. What's your thoughts on that? And is it possible? Sounds like the Olympia's kind of doubled down on that. And just your thoughts on all that.
Chris likes to use the word insane. This is an insane proposal. I want you to think about, we heard the Cascadia Rising presentation. If we have an earthquake, for example, we have a natural catastrophe or something. I want you to think about what would happen if everybody had an electric car and the grid went down and everybody would be stuck not only at home with no refrigeration, but no way to leave to go get supplies. I sit on the Environment Committee. In order to prevent brownouts, you need a 16% more electrical production than you're actually using in order to prevent brownouts. And we are at something like 0.5%. So we are right on the line. If everybody was to have an electric car, then you would have to say to yourself, hey, you know what? In that Tahali subdivision, we need to put in a substation. You would need a substation in every housing development, and you would need $6 to $7 billion in infrastructure improvement to run new power lines and all that stuff to actually do what they say they want to do. Recently, I had a delegation from the Congo come, and we sent them on a tour around the state and all that stuff. And you know why they're here? They're here because they want to look for investment they want to build a dam, a hydroelectric dam, and because they are worried that they are going to run out of lithium, cobalt, and nickel, which are primary components of making electric batteries. So everybody is talking about, oh, we're going to run out of fossil fuel. We got a 400-year supply of fossil fuel, and we got a 10-year supply of rare earth materials in order to make batteries. Now, so I mean, you could weigh that. It does not seem as a practical thing. I think it's dangerous. It's dangerous for our citizens. And you'll probably experience somebody coming in with a 10-year-old electric car, a 6-year-old electric car with dead batteries. How much are you going to give them for a trade-in? I mean, the car's worthless. The batteries cost more than the car. So people are starting to experience that kind of stuff where, the cars are getting older and now all of a sudden they go to trade it in and they think it has some value and it's worthless. So anyway, it's a dumb idea. Other than that, I don't have another opinion.
Thank you. And then my last question, back to you, Mr. Vance. Down the same lines, transportation thoughts, the endless fees. I did double check before I went on today. We have the highest sales tax in the nation. We also have the highest car registration fees in the nation. And then on top of that, any thoughts on the electric car mandate? To you.
So several things. The legislature this last year passed, or the year before maybe, the capital gains tax to just add to the coral reef of taxes we have in Washington state. That's not what we need to be doing. We don't need to be adding more taxes and fees. I will not vote to raise taxes. I don't know if I've ever voted to raise taxes in my career. Remember, I was a Republican for a very long time. What we need in this state is comprehensive tax and governance reform. We need to sit down with Republicans, Democrats, business, labor, environmentalists, unions, everyone, and redesign how we provide basic services in Washington state and how we pay for them. Because we don't have other taxes, the taxes we have are super, super high. So that's what we need to do rather than raise taxes. In terms of funding transportation, I'll say again, I was a Republican for a very long time, and I remember when the Republican Party was the party of infrastructure, all the way back to Dwight Eisenhower, and Republicans were willing to raise taxes to fund transportation to grow the economy. And that now they simply are not, and offer this excuse that they want to take money out of the general fund budget, which is never going to happen, and which is a terrible idea. One of the basic building blocks of state government has been to keep separate the general fund and the transportation fund. In fact, the 18th Amendment to the Constitution says the gas tax can only be used to fund state highways. We need to keep the two funds separate. In terms of two more things, in terms of electric cars, I suspect that the Jeep Cherokee and the Ford Escape that I own now are going to be the last gasoline-powered cars I ever own. I think that we are transitioning to new technology because guess what? Climate change is real. We need to take it seriously. But to force it, as the government would try and force it too quickly, when people aren't ready, when the grid isn't ready, is just not realistic. We need to move with the market and with technology. My big idea in terms of funding transportation, by the way, is to do what other states and other countries have done, and that's create an infrastructure bank where you merge private sector funds with government funds to help provide money for projects rather than just constantly raising taxes. It's been implemented in other states. The federal government's talked about it for years. We need to move forward on that. But we have to be realistic about transportation and not propose ideas that are never going to happen.
Thank you. I'll add one last thing just so you can hear this part of it that is not always told. As a new car dealer, we have 11, so we're getting ready, amping up. We have 11 charging stations on our 10-acre property. And to have someone that's skilled to be able to work on those charging stations is probably one of the hardest things. 6 of them are not programmed right, and to find people, you have to fly them from all around the nation. So it's another element to it. But anyway, back to Tara.
All right. Well, hey, we kind of ate into that great time we had created, and I'm feeling a little bad about Representative Robertson and Carrie Wilbur, who are soon to come. I, again, probably need to give you your last, words, but let's really keep it at the 30 seconds. So Chris Vance, to you, please. Final comments.
Great. Well, again, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
This is the most interesting state Senate race in the state. It's one of the 4 or 5 that are attracting a lot of attention. And I just fundamentally believe that our system is broken in dangerous ways that cannot continue. And it's not going to get any better as long as we keep electing left-wing Democrats and right-wing Republicans. I think we need more moderates in public office, and I think we need a few independents. And I'm trying to become the first, and I'd appreciate your support.
Great. Thank you. Senator Fortunato.
In closing, as a small businessman, I hate the B&O tax with a passion. I write a check every quarter for, the privilege of doing business in the state of Washington. I'm also on the tax structure work group. So when Chris talks about redoing it, there are some changes that are proposed for the B&O tax that would be based on net gain instead of gross sales, which would help car dealers. I guess in closing, I would like your support. And basically, I'm better looking and smarter than my opponent. So, thank you.
Well, the throwdown. All righty. Thank you, guys. Very much appreciate it. All right. On to the last race here. Thank you for all your patience and for hanging in there, everyone. Definitely want to give Representative Eric Robertson and Carrie Wilbur their full due. So go right ahead and introduce yourself, Representative Robertson.
Thank you, Tara, and the members of the chamber for hosting this event. I think it's important that people have the opportunity, even virtually, to engage their elected officials and the challengers, because I think our society is built on choices, and I appreciate that. I've lived in East Pierce County in the 31st district for 55 years, and I know that's hard to believe for someone that's 39, but I have been here for that period of time, and I've been active in my community my entire adult life. I'm a retired state trooper, retired U.S. Marshal for Western Washington, and a small business owner. I've pushed the pause button on my small business in order to properly serve the constituents in the 31st. I served 2 terms in the 31st district back in the late 90s when we were in the majority. I enjoyed that period of time. However, I went on to finish my career, and after hitting almost 36 years in public service, I retired at the end of 2018, only to step back up when there was an open seat in 2020. So I try to be, probably my hallmark, I would guess, is try to be a listener and a collaborator. And I think that's really paid off. If you look at the endorsements that I've received, I received endorsements from the business community like NFIB and others, as well as labor groups, law enforcement, as well as the WEA. So I have a broad range of endorsements that I think really well represent all of the folks, in the 31st district. It's not because I agree all the time with everybody. It's because I listen to their opinions. I look at how they affect the people in the 31st district and the state, for that matter, and then I vote accordingly. So I also try really hard to focus on constituent issues. State government, it's no secret, has been a hot mess for several years now, 10 at least. And that creates issues for people that own businesses, the people that are looking for unemployment benefits or labor and industry. And our office works really closely with the constituents and the state government to try and resolve those on behalf of them. And with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Great. Thank you. Well, good morning, Carrie. So nice to meet you.
There we go. Good
Here we
morning.
are. Good
It's a
morning.
pleasure to be here. So I'm a first-time candidate. I grew up in this part of the world. My parents moved us here in 1980, and it's been a real experience to get to raise my own kids here. My kids are almost all adults now. And I'm sure some of you have been around long enough to remember what a big deal it was when Safeway arrived up here on the plateau in Bonnie Lake. And this is definitely not the same community as it was then. So as it pertains particularly to business and particularly small business, I am very interested in restructuring B&O tax. I echo a great deal of what Chris Vance had to say about how that works in practical application. My dad is a tax accountant, and I worked for him for a while when I was in college, and that was an education. There's the onus ends up too often on the people least able to really flex within that, and that is too often small business owners and their families. That shows up both in the sales tax, as pointed out here, but also property taxes, because people who are trying to really make a presence for their family when they own their own property, and are trying to create that generational wealth for their kids and grandkids, end up sort of taking it on the chin there as well. I am running because because Eric was running unopposed, and I'm really passionate about the democratic process. And that, I think, is really well showcased when people talk and ask questions and wait for the answers, and can process those kinds of things and carry it forward. So I'm happy for this opportunity and happy to take questions.
And carry it forward. I like it.
Yes. Oh, very nice. You're hired.
All right. Go ahead, Luke. Let's fire up the questions.
Thank you. Good morning. Nice meeting you both. The first question will be for Carrie. So I couldn't find too much last night when I was researching the questions today on you, but I did find a questionnaire, and I apologize if I didn't find the right one, but I believe it was something that you must have filled out when you filed to run. But you said, this is a quote that you put in there, you said, people who work hard are people who work harder for less return, end quote. Can you expand on that?
I am happy you asked that question. So when Dwight Eisenhower signed the raise in minimum wage to $1 an hour, at the time, there were quotes circulated about this being a demarcation, and no longer would anybody be working full-time and unable to feed their families. And at this point, the wages that we see, and I'm sure small business owners especially can attest to the big chunk of their budget that goes out towards wages, and yet we're still having trouble hiring people. The minimum wage, if it had followed along with inflation, would be in the neighborhood of $27 an hour, depending on where you are and what your configuration for that math is. So when we think about people who are working harder and seeing less for their efforts, that would be probably the biggest place. And I know from my family that oftentimes the people who end up giving the most when there's a crisis in a small business structure are the owners, the people who are really invested in making sure that it makes it through difficult times. And so if you're making your payroll, you might end up really scrimping on something else. You're going to pay for your insurance, and you're going to manage the people that you need to financially, but that might mean skipping a lot at home. So that would be the first thing. And the second thing I would say is that we see that, especially Representative Chambers mentioned about the problems we're seeing right now with care providers, healthcare as an industry and in practical application, for people who have loved ones in care facilities or trying to care for them at home. Hiring people in those settings is brutally difficult. And the expectations of people working in healthcare right now, the list continues to grow while the flexibility for time off or professional development, just recovery from your job is shrinking actively.
Thank you. So this next question is for Representative Robertson. So you've been in politics for a while, as you mentioned. What is your crowning achievement to help small business?
I think it's being consistently looking at the different pieces of legislation that actually harm business and providing alternatives. And that's what we've done the last 2 years. The last 2 years, we've seen a lot of anti-business, pro-socialism style bills that have gone through the legislative process and been signed by the governor. One example, the one I really like, and I think you'll be able to relate to this, is the Department of Revenue, in their infamous wisdom, decided to start taxing the incentives that new auto dealers receive from manufacturers. I was the second co-sponsor. I was the Republican co-sponsor on a bill to make them stop that. It wasn't even to repeal any law, because there was no law passed. It was just something they just started doing. And we actually passed that unanimously through both the House and the Senate, Representative Chapman and I. And our message is why are you taxing success and incentives that folks are receiving for doing great work and bringing business into Washington State, and taking away a competitive mark with our border communities that have these businesses. Unfortunately, the governor, after it passed with 147 legislators supporting it, the governor vetoed it because, well, he just didn't like it. And so that's what we've been up against the last 2 years. As far as crowning achievement, I don't think there's one that stands out. I think I've just been consistently looking at legislation and policies that are out there to support the job creators. The small business community is the backbone of our economy, and unless we do something to change the direction that the majority has been going the last several years, I fear that folks will continue to go under.
Thank you, and thank you for doing that. That was it. So this question is for Carrie. So other than seeing Representative Robertson being unopposed, what was the single moment that motivated you to run for this office?
That would have to be the birth of my youngest child. Quinn is completely dependent and nonverbal, and he's the youngest of 5, and I thought I knew something about parenting kids, and Quinn showed up to help me remember that I am a humble human being and I know nothing about children. And getting involved with advocacy for him, because watching some of the kids in various healthcare settings that we've been in over time, he's a pretty medically complex kid, very happy, but complex. Every time I have found myself advocating for him, I watch how something will change within a system, whether it's a small system, access for a business, or at Seattle Children's or at Children's Therapy Unit in Puyallup. Something will shift, and I will watch that happen and think about the people who can't, for whatever reason, bring that up for themselves, whether it's a language barrier or they are so busy trying to, keep themselves fed and clothed that they can't manage that bandwidth. I just every time, whether it's a parking space, they widened the parking spaces at CTU a couple of years ago, so we can now fit our van and his wheelchair situation in there. There are so many people who can't speak up. I have time right now and the energy for this. And I think people have to take turns. Functional democracy means that we're all invested, whether it's voting or calling our representatives or, asking our neighbors if they need some help with something, some advocacy there. Everybody has to be involved at some point, and this is a point where I could be.
Thank you. And for my final question of the morning to Representative Robertson. So as a constituent, actually one of your constituents in the 31st District, you mentioned on your website many times you fight for lower taxes as one of your top priorities. That seems generic at times when you hear that from politicians. What does that mean to you, and how have you done it?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And fighting for lower taxes is, yes, is broad-based. But if you look at the number of times that the Democrats have tried to raise taxes and did raise taxes over the past 2 years, that page would be full of different bills that had tax increases, fee increases, and other increases. They absolutely, in 2021, came in and wrote a budget. And then 1 year later, in the short session, 2022, blew $15 billion in surplus just 1 year after writing a balanced biennial budget. And that was all on programs and things, many of them good thoughts and meaningful. But again, no meaningful tax relief to the middle class of Washington State. And like I say, there's such a long list of all of the tax and fee increases that it would be impossible for me to outline them. And so we have stood up and created alternatives. I'm really proud of my seatmate, Drew Stokesbury, who wrote a balanced budget with no tax increases as a hallmark of the Republican caucus's effort to live within its means. And I supported that, as well as the transportation budget, that the platform there that did the very same thing. But instead, the majority blew through the surplus to the point where the Democratic treasurer of the state of Washington wrote every single one of us legislators and said, hey, slow down. You're spending all this money and there's not going to be enough in reserves. But it went ignored.
Thank you. So that completes my questions. Thank you to everybody who answered them and who showed up today. I'll pass it back to Tara.
Great. All right. Well, let's go ahead and give you 30 seconds each to close before we wrap up our candidate forum.
Ladies first.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Oh, thanks so much. Two things really stick out to me about the questions today and this race in general, or any race really for the state of Washington. Our legislature has been able in the past to be really creative with how we've addressed different issues. I was really excited to see the drop in the tolls for the bridge in Tacoma after this last session. And I think that we can do more with that. And I mean, really a lot more with that. Our tax situation in Washington state is the most regressive in the nation. It's just upside down, inside out. We don't want to be ranked, the best at that particular thing on anybody's scale. And the other thing that really, really stands out to me is in conversation with small business owners, the pandemic really kicked people's butts, obviously. I met a woman a couple of weeks ago when I was out in Tahali who was ready to expand, was ready to hire employees, was ready to have her own physical space for the first time in the course of her small business, and had to go back to just dealing with everything out of her garage, and has not been able to turn it around because such a huge chunk of her receipts are spent in taxes. And it's a problem. It's a problem. We need to have people be able to function well, and make progress for their own families. Thanks so much for the invitation today.
Representative Robertson.
Thank you. And thank you once again to the Chamber for their work in putting this on. It's important. And I want to thank Carrie for running. I mean, I believe in democracy, and I think that having choices is important. And I thank her for that. However, I will state that I agree with her that I think we need reforms in our taxation. As I pointed out, here we've got our state government executive and his departments taxing incentives for success. I mean, how does that make sense? It doesn't. And we need tax reform. We need our budget process reformed. The Democrats have been in charge of all three branches of government for the last several years and have done nothing. There's a better alternative. We have demonstrated that with budgets on both the operating and transportation, which show we can live within our means. And if that's what you like, I'm your guy. If not, you have an alternative. Thank you.
Great. Well, hey, this concludes us. I know we ran over, and I so appreciate that those of you who were able to stick around. As I mentioned, next GAC on November 1st, we hope to have some of our congressional candidates. But hey, most importantly, just you got to hear straight from their mouths today, the candidates. Read up about them. Luke, thank you so much for providing such insightful questions that really fleshed out some of the disparities between candidates. And we're just on point for chamber business-minded folks wanting that good information. Again, thank you all. And just don't forget to vote, right? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to our candidates and our elected officials. Appreciate it.